Hello everybody and welcome to another in-depth deck building video. Today we're going to be talking about a Fighter Silas as requested by someone on Patreon, and also one vote from our Twitch chat with me as the deciding vote. If this is your first time seeing one of these series, what I do is I build a deck and I talk about it in as in-depth detail as I feel like I can without rambling on and on and on. There's a link down in the description to, I'll see if I remember to put this in, to the first one I did, which was a Joe Diamond Flex deck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about all these cards that I'm going to be putting in, why I'm putting them in, what synergies I'm looking for in my deck that I would be putting them into, and what my job is and why these cards help me do my job, as well as talking about Travis's Pyramid, which is honestly, I think just a great guide for deck building. It just gets things going. So, Silas Marsh, let's start with our boy. He is my favorite investigator, and he's the investigator that I've built the most decks for. So, in theory, this should all actually come pretty easily. We have 2 brain, 2 book, 4 fist, and 4 foot. We are designed for one thing, and one thing only, and that is enemy management. After you reveal a chaos token during a skill test you're performing, return a skill you committed to this test to your hand, limit once per round. And I'll just add effect, probably one of the strongest in the game. It's my personal vote for strongest, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to argue it outside of the top 3. +0. You may commit a skill effect from your discard pile to this test. After this test ends, return the skill to your hand instead of discarding it. What this card kind of does, it's akin to like playing an event from your discard pile and then putting that event into your hand. That's kind of like what this actually does, and it also, you know, it's the nicest Elder Sign to draw. We only have we have 9 meat, but we only have 5 brain horror for 5 horror soak. So we are a little bit fragile on the horror side, and we also only have 2 brains. So these are just things we need to be aware of. As the fighter, our job is to just kill things. Our purpose is to kill enemies, so that's what we're going to spend most of our time doing. This deck is actually going to start with an in the thick of it. So we're going to be taking it in the thick of it. It's in the thick of it. And we're going to take 2 physical trauma. So, I think it should be pretty obvious why we are taking the physical trauma, because we have a lot more red than we have blue. So I think that should be pretty easy to kind of understand. But the question is, what are we going to take? And this one, we're actually going to be starting with this, because one of them is going to be a way for us to deal with enemies. We're going to be taking this hatchet as a weapon for us to fight with on scenario 1. Hatchet. Fight. Add your foot to your skill value for its attack. This attack deals +1 damage. If this attack defeats an enemy, discard hatchet. Otherwise, lose control of hatchet and attach it to the attacked enemy. Attached enemy gains. When attached enemy is defeated, take control of hatchet. Any investigator at hatchet's location may trigger this ability. This is a very interesting card that has a little bit of a song and dance to it, but as I was discussing with Twitch chat, where I stream every Tuesday and Friday, by the way, Silas, Rita, and Daniela are probably the investigators that use hatchet the best. The reason for this is that Silas is designed to fight without a weapon, but you don't want to be fighting without a weapon all of the time. So we're going to be playing a 1 of hatchet for one of our weapons. We're not going to look at our other 2 experience yet. We're going to get there. However, the other hatchet is going to... I want to play this deck already. I haven't played Hatchet Silas yet, but I want to play it. On this deck, I want to play this deck. This makes me want to play this deck, and I've only added 2 cards. It's just going to be a fun time. We're going to look at other weapons, because we are the goon. So we are going to be wanting to stab and kill as much as possible. We're going to be running 2 copies of Fire Axe, because we don't really care too much about our resources in this deck, at least at level 0. This might get, actually, I think even I might make this as a 1 of, we might make this as a one of to run with the other hatchet. I think so. We're going to make this a one of, and then we're going to upgrade this fire axe into this upgraded other axe instead. A smaller axe, but it's going to hit better. So this just allows us to use our resources, which we're going to be a very heavy skill deck. Spoiler alert, Silas plays a lot of skills. So this deck is going to be, excuse me, a lot different than the Joe Diamond deck previously. This one's going to be actually a lot easier for us to build and, you know, get things going. Yeah, this is just a nice option. We're going to look at some other weapons, though, because we need to be able to kill things. We have 2, 3. We're going to go up to 5. We're going to run 2 copies of the 18 Derringer. I like this gun. It's a bit on the expensive side. Admittedly, it does cost 3 resources, but it's guaranteed 2 damage. If you fail, you get a place 1 ammo on it. So it's like it's going to guarantee hit for 4 damage off of these cards. We are going to also probably look at eventually upgrading this as well. So you get +2 fist and deal +1 for this attack. If you fail, you get 3 ammo, cost 2, so reduces the thing. We're going to put that in there right now. And then I think, so the thing is, like, the problem is I don't want to go too hard on other weapons. And the reason for that is that we want to be playing with the hatchet, or optimally we want to be playing with the sea change harpoon, because this works like really well for Silas. If you committed 1 or more skills to this test, it deals +1 damage. So it's one of those things that, like, if you committed, and I'm also 90% sure, number one, because no one has corrected me and I've been doing it for the longest time, but I'm pretty sure that if you reveal, if you return the skill to your hand, it's still, you did actually still technically committed a card to this. I'm pretty sure it still counts as a committed card. Because you committed a card, you just brought it back to your hand, but you still technically did commit a card to the test. So even if you return it with Silas's ability, it still is going to deal +1 damage. So this is the thing that we're like, we really want to be playing with the Sea Change Harpoon and the Hatchet. These other cards are kind of just here to ensure that we have a weapon to fight with until we find the things that we really want to fight with. Do you ever use Silas's replacement signatures? Oh yeah. All the time. I don't think we're going to do it for this deck, but if you have the replacement stuff, Nautical Prowess is a very good card, and the weakness I think is actually easier than Siren Call. As a goon, you need to be very aware with Silas and Siren Call when it can show up, because if you draw it at the wrong time and you can no longer commit cards, you are going to get rocked. So you just need to be constantly aware of this Siren Call as it might show up. Just something to have in the back of your mind so you don't just freaking die because you can't, like, commit cards anymore. Someone else clearing it out for you is really nice. This is something you just need to be aware of. So, like, if you go to add in the replacement signatures, well, it adds another one. It gives you a nice card with it. However, the Harpoon is a very nice card. The Net, which does something similar to it, I also enjoy playing. I think the Net is also actually a pretty good card. Silas is all about killing and evading. So there's a lot of people, I've seen discussion online, and I think it's entirely fair and reasonable that don't trust Silas as the main goon, because Silas goons differently, and I always have a hard time now that I know how the internet has taken gooning and turned it into different things, but I'm Canadian, damn it. Goon means fighter to me, like a brawler. So Silas fights and deals with monsters a lot differently than other investigators, than like a guardian or a rogue does. And he does it by, sometimes he has to evade and deal with it next turn, but he also can just, like, output a lot of damage. You just have to be, like, brave with how you're committing things. So is this all we're doing for our weapons? And the answer to that is yes, because my friend, skill cards are weapons now. So skill cards are going to be how we additionally kill things. We're going to add some stuff here for our purpose, which is killing enemies or enemy management. So if we look at the triangle here, we got this purpose stuff. We're going to grab 2 copies of a new card that just came out in Hemlock Veiled called Longshot. This is Silas has got a vicious blow, baby. So the nice thing about Silas is that once per turn, you can bring a card back to ensure that it triggers. So like if you miss with your long shot hit, you can bring it back next turn, and then they try again for the next attack or even on the next turn. So it's some nice stuff to it. Luckily as well, long shot also works on evasion tests. So it's one of those things that you can use it also when you're evading an enemy, which is really nice when it comes with it. It just drops some extra damage on them. I did not put that into the deck. I just talked about the card. All right, so let's just look at damage. Some damage stuff here. So if we look at events, we're probably not going to worry about too many of these. We're going to have, honestly, in a perfect world, as few events as possible in this deck. Because I don't think we just want any of them. So our options are limited, admittedly. But we're going to do great for that. Okay. All right, our ally. I'm a big believer of Madame Lebranche in Silas Marsh. Now, you might be thinking, what about Peter Sylvester? Yes, Peter Sylvester is very good for Silas Marsh, but I think that Madame Lebranche is better for Silas. I think that it's very easy. Here, just give me allies, because we can look at them all at once. I think it's very easy to put Peter Sylvester in and just have a good time with it. Even the upgraded version, right? But I think I am going to be upgrading into Jessica Hyde. So Peter Sylvester, obviously really good. Keeps you alive with the horror. But I think we're going to be upgrading into Jessica Hyde for our ally. So instead, we're going to just be running Madame Lebranche in our level 0 deck. The reason for this is she's just going to give us some additional horror soak when we are at our weakest, right? So that's kind of what she is going to exist for in this deck. She also allows us to, for example, on our first turn, we can play Sea Change Harpoon. It's in our opening hand. We can play Madame Lebranche, and we can gain a resource because we have no resources in our hand. Again, we're going to be taking her and turning her into Jessica Hyde sooner rather than later. And the reason we want for her is while Peter Sylvester gives us a foot and a brain boost and like horror that won't kill us, we cherish this +1 fist a lot more than we want to admit. It just gives us some consistency and allows us to actually fight occasionally without skills as well. But we are going to be using a lot of skills for that. Okay. Let's start going to our economy. And our economy in this deck is on one card that everyone hates when people play it in Silas Marsh. And that's Unrelenting. So, this is a 1 experience skill. It's practice. Max 1 committed per test. After you commit Unrelenting to a skill test, search the Chaos bag for up to 3 non-autofill Chaos tokens and seal them on Unrelenting. If all 3 tokens sealed are either the +1, 0, Bless, and or Elder Sign tokens, draw 2 cards. Release all tokens sealed here after this test ends. So what you do is you commit this card to a test. You say +1, 0, 0, and then you return it to your hand after you draw the token. Pass or fail, return it to your hand. It's really nice if you actually like succeed the test and like it doesn't cause you to fail. There will be times when you're loaded up on cards and you don't need to, but this card is just such insane value in Silas Marsh that while he doesn't need it as much as he did earlier, it still is just such a powerful way to ensure that you are you're gonna do this. That you're gonna just like make sure your hand is loaded in skills and you're not gonna go negative on the value there. Funnily enough, it's really funny with his Elder Sign. So you commit the test, so you reveal the Elder Sign. You can commit Unrelenting. You can seal +1/0/0 and draw 2 cards, and then turn Unrelenting to your hand. It's a very nice card from your discard pile for Silas Marsh's Elder Sign effect. Each one of these skills, we want to look at its ability to get played by his Elder Sign effect. And that might sound crazy to put so much weight into that, but there's a lot of good skills that Silas can play, and we want to ensure that every test we take, we want to commit a card to it if we draw the Elder Sign. Again, that sounds wild, but the ability is that good that if you do not get full value from the Elder Sign when you draw to Silas Marsh, you are leaving so much on the table, and we want to ensure that we hit that. So each card needs to be something that has a wild, or something that can commit during fighting, or basically just has like a fist or a foot test. Those are going to be the things that we're looking for. Because of that, we're going to be running Quick Thinking as another one of our skills. This is just really nice in Silas. Silas's deck building is innate, so that's why so we're able to use this to our advantage here. So if it's successful at 2 or more, you may immediately take an action as if it was your turn. This card is so good to hit on the Elder Sign, so you're going to want to be committing this early on in this scenario to get the value out of it, and then maybe you get the Elder Sign. Now, this is actually a great segue that I want to talk about, and D. Scarpack, you said this here. It's so sad to draw the Elder Sign on the first test of the game. It is. And people might be wondering, should I play Short Supply in Silas Marsh? And the answer is no. You should not play Short Supply in Silas Marsh. I think that there's a lot of good reasons to play Short Supply, but in Silas Marsh, I do not think that is the case. Because the only reason that we are playing Short Supply, that you would play Short Supply, is to get his Elder Sign going. We do have Resourcefuls that we're going to be putting into this deck for sure, but we're not going to be doing that like for Short Supply. We're not like, okay, maybe we can grab something from this. So the thing with Silas is that we would like to choose to get more value out of it, right? Like with Will York, it's easy because you're recurring so much from your discard pile. Silas doesn't actually have recursion unless it's on his Elder Sign effect. So we would rather, like, what would you rather have here? Okay, let's paint a picture. What would you rather have here? You, on your first turn, mill Short Supply, and then on your Short Supply, and you mill Quick Thinking. Okay, let's just like paint this hypothetical. And then on your second turn, you use your Elder Sign effect to like use Quick Thinking. Maybe not your second turn, maybe like on your 5th turn, right? Or would you rather have played Quick Thinking, gotten an action off of Quick Thinking, and then on your 5th turn, use your Elder Sign to get an extra action out of Quick Thinking, right? So like that's the kind of thing that, while the first one does sound fine because you don't need to think about it too hard, right? It can get there, and it's fine. We're looking for more value. And Silas wins by just outvaluing the game slowly with every skill test he makes. So that's why we want to be committing Quick Thinking and putting it in our discard that way, as opposed to just milling it in there at the start of the game and just having it in there. I know why we're getting Jessica Hyde now. And I actually don't know what you're referring to, because I don't have a plan for Jessica Hyde apart from her being here. Maybe I'm missing something. Okay. No, that actually is a good synergy, and that is probably what we're going to be adding. So I won't bury the lead. They're talking about Strong Armed. Yes, this is something we're going to put into our deck for sure. Notably, it does not work with the Derringer. This is not a ranged weapon. You can only shoot a gun up close. It's a melee weapon, but it's not a melee weapon, but it's melee ranged. So what this does is it's just after revealing chaos tokens, you may take a damage to cancel that token, and Jessica Hyde works really well for that. So this is going to be in our side deck. We're just going to be looking at getting stuff going. Okay, let's talk about skills, because honestly, we're kind of at that point of the deck. Our economy is card draw. And also take art. We'll also play take art. We're also going to play take art here. Let's talk about take art. It's really good. It gives you resources. It gives you some cards. The nice thing about Silas is that you can also use it to pass a test. Like, sorry, not to pass a test. If you would pass a test when it's committed, which often happens somehow with take art, you can get rid of it. It's really easy to trigger on a book action during downtime. It also feasibly could be a one-of. But, I mean, I like take art, but I'd eventually probably take it out, especially when our curve gets a little bit lower. Like, when you upgrade the Derringers into the level 2 version, you can probably get rid of them pretty easily. All right, let's start by looking at the off-class skills. Let's just start talking about them. Daring, very nice card for Silas Marsh. Might make the cut in our deck. It has the things we wanted. It's during an attack and evasion, it has wilds, and it gives us some value after the test ends. Notably, you have to be aware of these things with Silas. Silas's ability will not draw the card after you pull this card back, because the card does not exist anymore, so this after this test ends will not exist. These are kind of things that you just have to learn with Silas. It's some people's pet peeve with Silas Marsh, and my response to that is just like, get good. Helping Hand, we're not going to play. Card's poopy. We're not going to play this one. Inspiring Presence, I don't think it's terrible. I think this is something that you would want to build around your ally more, right? So like with Jessica Hyde, she's healing the damage herself, not that relevant. However, if we're playing Jacob Morrison in a Blessed deck, this card goes up in value, right? Intrepid, no thank you, it's poopy. Purified, no thank you. It's not what we're doing, and honestly, probably a little bit poopy. And then we have Steadfast, which is also kind of just fine, but we're probably not going to move the needle too much. Accursed, no thanks. Not what we want to be doing. It's just like, we don't need to be adding curse tokens. We're not going to be caring about that too much. If you're playing with someone who's doing a cursed build, this does go up in value for Silas, but we're not going to worry about that too much. Defiance, we also just don't care enough. The value is not good enough. This is one that will work with Silas because it's before revealing chaos for the tests, and it's during this test, including its modifier. This one, I believe, does carry over with Silas's effect. Fearless, I like to run in Silas, but I don't think we're going to run it in this deck because I think we're just going to have better options to manage our horror, which I promise we will get to. Is the Ranch your only horror soak so far? That ain't going to go well. Silas needs less than you think. I don't know. Okay, I don't know why UMFers are so scared of failing tests. It's so easy to pass tests in this game. You just like commit cards and you're going to be okay. Trust me, it's going to be fine. All right, Cunning, we're not going to do. Nimble, I think, is a good card to go with this. To rock for this plan. So it's one that we're going to put a flag in, but I don't know if it's going to make the cut. It's a very good card, though. Opportunist, I think, is not great in Silas, but the upgraded version is nice. Curiosity, Eureka, Inquiring Mind, and True Understanding, we're not going to move the needle too much. And now we're on our good friends, the Survivor ones. Before that, though, we're just going to throw an Overpower. Card gives you 2 Fist. It works for the Sea Change Harpoon. It replaces itself after you draw it. We're going to be rocking with that one. And now we're going to go to the Survivor ones, where we have a good chunk of stuff that we're going to play with here. First one we're going to look at is our good friend, Resourceful. This card is going to do so much work in our deck once we get to the upgraded version. Sorry, once we get to the upgraded version of some other cards that we're going to be putting in here, it's going to do less at like the lower XP levels, but then once we get into the higher upgraded versions of our deck, Resourceful is going to go through the roof. A reason for that is a card that we're going to be putting in our sideboard, which is Brute Force. Probably the best combat skill in the game. This thing is insane. It's nice in Silas, where it allows you to pull it back if you don't get for the 3 damage. Very good with his Elder Sign effect if you are basic fighting. It's going to be less thing. However, don't be afraid to pull this back with his Elder Sign, or alternatively, pull back Resourceful, grab Brute Force, put Resourceful and Brute Force into your hand, right? Like, this is like what I'm talking about, like the power of Silas's ability can go through the absolute moon. So, we're going to be putting these in our sideboard because they're going to eventually be making it into our deck. Resourceful, as I said, it scales up really well. Brute Force with Resourceful is the loop that you're going to be doing again and again in Silas, and it's going to be a great, great time. Next one we're going to look at here is Stunning Blow. This card is just some nice value against enemies. It's just something that allows you to evade an enemy when you are fighting it, and it lets you do some double duty. This is a winner for a lot of campaigns, especially for boss monsters that show up, and this is what allows Silas, while Silas doesn't have the damage output of like a Guardian or a Rogue in terms of their combat prowess, what Silas does have is he has efficiency, so like he'll be able to fight really well for that. This card and like and Sweeping Kick are like very similar, and that's why like effects like this are just like good to just have going into your deck. Okay, Survival Instinct also may make the cut, but we have to look at some other places for this deck. I think at this point now, our purpose is pretty solid. Our economy is mostly card draw, because if we look at our curve, we have 4 cards that cost 2, 3 cards that cost 3, and then we have 1 card that costs 1. That's the Fire Axe. I was like, which I don't even know what it is, to be honest. But we need to add a little bit of survivability, because you do need to be aware of it in Silas, but you do need a lot less than you think. And we're going to be doing that through just a little teddy bear. Just a teeny tiny little teddy bear who's going to do a lot of work for us. Because we're going to eventually get into the upgraded version of this teeny tiny little teddy bear, which is going to do a lot of work for us as well. The nice thing about this guy is that you have a lot of ways that you can play this. So let's talk about the Cherish Keepsake first. You put it into play, it soaks to horror, it goes away. Happy days. That's all just a good time. When you get to this upgraded version, don't be afraid to exile it. This deck, as you can see from his experience, is actually incredibly low to the ground in how it upgrades, right? But what this does is allows you to, for example, you can put 3 horror on it, and then you can play another Cherished Keepsake if the opportunity comes. And as a goon, yes, there will be an opportunity for you to actually be able to take the downtime to play an asset as needed. The card draw on this deck is going to be insane. Trust me, you're going to be discarding cards, and we have a plan for that in our upgrades, but you're going to be discarding cards more than you actually can imagine. Unrelenting is insane card draw. You're probably going to cycle through your deck, which is a good thing for, like, you can bring these Cherished Keepsakes back. So if you put 3 horror, play the other one, put 3 horror. With that said, don't be afraid to put 4 horror onto it when you get into the upgrades. And now you might be thinking, is that all that we're doing to not die to horror? And the answer is yeah. You actually don't need that much for Silas, especially when we start adding some survivor mitigation in the form of Lucky. Yay! This is a reason why we want to get rid of the Fire Axe, because we are looking at getting out of, like, we want to be able to still hold some resources to make things work for us. So, just fast, when you fail a skill test, you get +2 skill value for this test. What's your opinion on Talisman of Protection for him? Honestly, I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's terrible at all. I think that's another great option. Is it's fast, so you get to save some stuff. I'll show that on screen. Talisman of Protection. Yeah, I think Talisman of Protection is another fine option for him. He doesn't need that with his resources too much, because he's going to be, like, you know, mostly slinging skills. But it's just something to, it's another avenue to explore. thought you were done for assets. That makes sense. Yeah, no, because without Cherish Keepsake rounds it out so much better with just Madame Lebranche. If you're playing Peter Sylvester, let's go back to Peter for a second. If you're going back to Peter Sylvester, you can probably survive without the Cherish Keepsake, but I'd still run it just in case. Play two-handed. There are 3 runner remains in the deck. Expect to draw 2 of them. Expect to draw 2 of them. Expect to draw -2 or -3 token. Deal with that. Okay, I'll play a Lucky on the -2. Take 1 horror. I'll commit something to beat the -3. Only take 2 horror. I lost what, 1 teddy bear? And took 1 horror? Like it's one of those things that, like, also here I'll throw it back. I'll throw your what if back at you. Play two-handed. There are 3 running remains in the deck. Draw none of them. Or pass all the tests, right? Like, I don't know. Okay, if you're not, I just understand. It just sounds very accusatory. It's one of those things that while it could happen, it might not. It might not happen. And like, I think it's, if you go overboard on survival, you go underboard on winning, right? So that's kind of the thought process for it. Okay, we have 6 more cards we got to put in here, but honestly, this deck is pretty close to being done. Let's look at some events. I do think that going to Eucatastrophe and Silas is a really nice... is a really nice way to go for Silas. You could put it in. You could put it in the side deck. I might even, like, it's just a nice thing to have. It only costs 2. We'll put it in the side deck for this. I think it's a path to go. I see what. Okay, sorry. I'm taking a second to read Dice Gods as much as again. I see what you're saying. That is your groundwork for how you deal for Horror Soak. So you're expecting to take. The base is that Rotting Remains, you're going to fail 1 by 2, 1 by 3. And that's like kind of what you have to go for. I think that is a very good... Once I like took a second to read it in kind of the full perspective. I get you. Okay, yes. I think that is a very good way to approach it, right? That you're going to fail 2 Rotting Remains. Yes, my Uno reverse does work as well. You might draw none of them, but it is better to prepare for taking... 5 horror, right? Like 5 horror is kind of just what you should expect to be taking from the Mythos deck. So if you have ways to mitigate that 5 horror, you're probably going to do okay. I think that's very fair. And taking that horror soak, or alternatively damage soak, but albeit damage soak is a little bit less. However, damage soak, I think we can all kind of agree on this, just due to the fact that Rotting Remains is more common than Grasping Hands. Damage Soak is actually more testless, or and it's more like incidental, right? But like Horror Soak, you generally are doing more tests for, and I think that's just because due to the nature of Rotting Remains being more of a thing, right? But then campaigns throw it out the window. But I think the basis of having the Mythos deck deal you 5 is I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? Because if we look at it, like, horror is most commonly dealt from the encounter deck throughout all the campaigns from Rotting Remains. And damage is dealt most commonly for all the campaigns through Hunting Shadow, right? I think that's... So maybe that is why it feels like horror is more... Interesting. Okay. Let's look at some events here to kind of close this out. Also, I am going to just grab 2 copies of Grizzled. The traits that I put on this changes from campaign to campaign, obviously, but you can usually get by with, like, what, humanoid is like a pretty safe one. Most enemies are humanoids. You can also go for, like, whatever... the Mythos thing that scares you most, whatever like Rotting Remains is, this gives you some additional protection. And then you can go for like stuff like upgrade into the things that get there. And you get to choose 2, so like humanoid and what's Rotting Remains? Terror. Yeah, that's like, these are like 2 just like solid options without thinking too hard. Oh, I always do this. And Terror. Ezekiel Abannon, 12 months of the Golden Table. That's 1 year. Holy hell. Thank you for your support. There's some campaign-specific ones, like Color and Color Out of Oz. That's a good pitch. But yeah, so like these are just like nice, safe ones to choose, but it really depends on the campaign. But I think these are just good ones that keep you kind of like being able to commit during combat, being able to commit during Mythos. Yeah. Usually Terror is the scary brain checks, and Hazard is the ouchy foot checks. Amen. Amen. Okay, let's look at some events. Let's just say we're going to be coming into Eucatastrophe. I'd probably play either End of the Road to fill that space, or alternatively, Jury Rig. I think I do like End of the Road. I think it's... do I? I don't know if I do. All right, I'm gonna round out our upgrades, our upgrade plan here before we look at these last two play set of cards. We're gonna be going into upgrade Lucky 3. This is gonna basically mean you're never gonna fail a test that you don't want to. So we're gonna grab this into our sideboard, and then I think the last thing that's like for our must get sideboard is we want to get this Hunting Jackets. So I guess what we're going to do is we're just going to look for something that's going to replace Hunting Jacket. So the thing about Hunting Jacket is this works so well for Silas. Especially in this deck where we don't care about resources, and it allows us to instead maybe have some mitigation when it comes to our Siren Call, right? When it comes to our Siren Call. So it allows us to bank those, or alternatively just be some economy. But what it really does is when we get to this Hunting Jacket, it allows us to, with our Unrelenting, cards that we would, excuse me, that we would normally discard, we can put into our Hunting Jacket and then get value out of them later. You can even throw, for example, let's say you had 2 copies, I'm losing my voice. Let's say you had 2 copies of Unrelenting in your hand. You can put one of them into Hunting Jacket and keep the other one back. Eventually have it go to your discard pile, destroy your Hunting Jacket, take that other Unrelenting back, start building your hand up again. It's a very nice card, and I think it's going to do really well in this Silas deck. So what are we going to replace that with? What are we going to replace? What's that going to be, and what is it going to turn into? I don't think we want to do Pelt Shipment in this deck, even though it does look appealing. I think that Silas's hand is going to be so loaded at scenario 0, scenario 1, that we're going to want to get through this. All right, I guess it's probably just going to be an event, right? Honestly, so the 2 events that are jumping out for me, problem is you don't want to hold events in your hand. But I mean, like, it's actually like End of the Road and Jury Rig. These are the 2 cards that are like, I feel like the last 2 I want to put in here. I mean, we look at some other skills too. But the thing is, we're probably cutting these. Like, these are cards that we're going to be cutting. So like, we're looking for specific cards that we do want to get rid of. So we don't want to like marry any of these ideas. We don't want to fall in love with them. We want to just use them. And that's why I think End of the Road is like a perfect card that you eventually want to just get rid of, right? It's also a card that discards very well to hand size earlier in the scenario. So we're going to grab End of the Road for those reasons. And we're also going to grab Jury Rig. Jury Rig makes our Silas's weapons a little bit more consistent earlier on in the campaign. You can also give it to other people's things. And I think this is what we're looking at. I think this is it. I gotta play Silas with the Hatchet, man. So yeah, this is a very simple deck. If we look at our curve again, I think we added we added 2 0 events, so our curve is very low. Our only like resource economy is Take Heart. Eventually we'll go into the leather jacket, the hunting jacket rather. The hunting jacket. Cherished Keepsake is going to be nice. Another Cherished Keepsake, Madame LeBranche, is going to be there for a bit, but we're going to eventually turn into a Jessica Hydes pretty early. We're going to be, in our mulligan, we're looking for a weapon and Unrelenting. If you can find Unrelenting early, you're going to have a great time. That's kind of like your goal for this deck. When it comes to it, you can use like Strong Armed to replace... I mean, you reasonably could. That's the problem, right? When we add all these skills, like we're gonna add just so many damage skiers here. Like Brute Force, you could replace Take Heart once we get more stuff in here, depending on if you want to go for Eucatastrophe. Hatch replaces the Fire Axe, Lucky replaces the Lucky, Derringer replaces the Derringer if you do go that route, which you probably should, because it's just fine to have more weapons for the sake of consistency as opposed to less weapons. But yeah, you have 2 cuts here. So like Eucatastrophe and Hunting Jacket. If you're going to do one, you probably want to do the other. You don't necessarily need Hunting Jacket. You can just like worry about upgrading your skills. You can always do more for Grizzled. You can choose, as Dice God said, do Monster instead of Humanoid because monsters usually have higher fights, or do the vice versa and then spend experience to add the other one. But again, this is all like really campaign dependent as well. I think that Always Prepared is really nice for this. I think that this is a pretty good upgrade. Just because it gives you value and... Get out of here. No, stop. It gives you the value. Oh, frick me. And then if you draw another one, you can get it back into your hand after that test. Yeah, it looks like you just have to sacrifice some skills. Like, the Take Heart I think will eventually be able to be sided out. Like, if you do Hunting Jacket, the Take Heart can go. Take Heart's also nice. Yeah, it really just depends on how the deck feels and how you're going to be playing. Upgrade. I don't like talking about upgrading and like upgrade paths, mainly because it's one of those things that it changes so much from campaign to campaign and how you play it. Right? It's like how you play it as well. And like those are all things that can really alter the vibes of how your upgrade path goes. No exile cards like Test of Will? I don't think so. It's the brain test you need to do this. Like you could go into the upgraded version to get there, but I think I'd rather just do things other ways. Like you could. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I will say that Silas, I respect the people who think that he's not as like, because it's true, he's not as good as a fighter as like the high-end Guardians or like even Daniela, right? Or even Will Yorick, right? He's not as good as each of them. And it's like a little bit of a learning experience to get there, but you just have to like commit hard, commit fast, and ensure that you're just getting as much value as you can out of your skill cards that you are committing. How about Persistence to upgrade? I think Persistence is fine to upgrade. So you may commit it to a skill test from your discard pile. If you do, shuffle into your deck after this test ends. I think after in practice, I like it a bit more in Min than I do in Silas. But I don't think it's like, it's just, I don't think it does enough. I think the problem is now like skills just do a lot more. I think it's actually like ironically better, not ironically, it's the Canadian ironically, which is not ironic, for Ashcan Pete, Wendy Adams, and like Min T-Fan. All right, as I did last time, any questions or any questions about this deck that you might have and the decisions before I close out the video? Otherwise, that's another in-depth deck building in the books, baby. I love Silas. This is a Silas deck I would play. It has a lot of moving pieces that are all really good. I don't think I would run the Grizzled all the time. I think the Grizzleds could be something else, but it is a very strong card. And I built this with a little bit of the mindset of like a new Silas experience for like newer players playing Silas, or like someone's like second or turn. What do you think about True Survivor for Recursion? Great question. So True Survivor is a fantastic card in Silas. I think if you are going with the Hunting Jacket and Eucatastrophe, I think that True Survivor is another great piece of that puzzle. I wouldn't with this deck, but it's one of those things that I think if you're going with Hunting Jacket, because of the amount of money that this is going to produce for you, it's really easy to also play True Survivor for that. With that, I'd keep the take cards because they work very well with also feeling the True Survivor. And I would potentially even lose. I mean, you could keep Grizzled, but I think I would lose Grizzled depending on how things shape up. Dark Horse 5, I also like Dark Horse 5 for this deck. However, if you are going to play Dark Horse 5, you'll need to buy a Scrapper as well. So just understand that if you're playing Dark Horse in this deck, you're going to probably want to also play Scrapper, and you're going to want to get rid of, you're not going to do Eucatastrophe. You're not going to want to play Eucatastrophe in that build. So it's like one of those things that this is like a starting point. It's actually a pretty alright starting point that you can then take in a direction that you want to take your Silas deck, because Silas has a lot of different upgrade paths that he can take to get things done. Alright, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to see more of this, again, let me know in the comments. Thank you to everyone who watched. Have a good one. And as always, GG's.